In Turkey, population 8 million, you will find hospitable, polite, and extremely professional people centered around family, food, and culture. Because of their unique location centered between Europe and Asia, they're the product of a melting pot effect. Due to this, it's difficult to understand the pure Turkish culture for outsiders and especially Turks. From a business aspect, they have an emerging market and high growth as identified by the International Monetary Fund. Their trading partners are Germany, Iraq, the UK, and Russia, and they contribute by exporting vehicle parts, machinery parts, knitted and crocheted goods, and articles.
Turkey is a country that occupies a very unique geographic position, being located partly in Asia and partly in Europe. Because of its location, Turkey has long acted as both a barrier and a bridge between the two continents, depending on the state of affairs between them. You might be surprised to hear that Turkey is actually larger by land mass than any European state. Turkey's capital is Ankara. However, its largest city and seaport, and perhaps its most well-known city to us Americans, is Istanbul. The modern Turkish Republic, which was founded in 1923 after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, is considered a parliamentary democracy. Despite its claim as a democracy, Turkey has recently shifted towards more of an authoritarian regime. The following clip is from an interview with Batu Akas, a student at Cal Berkeley who was born and grew up in Turkey. In this clip, he talks a little more about the current state of Turkey's politics.
It's the thing that's tough is it's kind of hard to right now because of how laws have been changed to benefit the current ruling power, but like now it's essentially become the borderline authoritarian in a way that laws are being shifted by like Turkey's president to benefit the continuation of his rule.
Throughout this exploration of Turkish culture, we have discovered so many wonderful things that people have to offer, yet every country has ways in which they function they aren't always proud of. The Turkish government is not known for being the most organized or ethical, which can make solving major ethical business issues difficult. One business issue Turkey has struggled with for decades is related to child labor exploitation. Textiles, nuts, and grains are some of Turkey's largest exports and consequently major hubs for underage workers. While 15 is legally the youngest a child should be working nearly full-time in harsh conditions, there are many regulatory loopholes in which laws that make a failed attempt to protect those children. Many families feel they have no other choice but to send their children to work to keep themselves alive, while other families simply just find working in the fields to be a social norm rather than an ethical issue. But the reality is that as long as it is profitable for companies to hire underage workers, they will continue to do so, and these young workers likely will never go back to school, receive higher level education, and have the privilege to better themselves and follow their dreams.
Culture is very much of the father trying to install, this is what you're going to do for your future. So you better learn this right now while I'm still alive. Is it child labor? Yes, it is. But in the country, a lot of the agricultural folk has been brought up the same way, generation after generation after generation. And it's not likely that without such peer pressure, they're going to be fine with such hard work.
Because Turkey is surrounded by 7 different countries, its culture is a melting pot of influences. It is influenced not only by many different countries, but also by both Europe and Asia. Islamic traditions have had strong impacts on the family and gender dynamics of the country.
It just depends on who you ask it to. Because there's always, the Turkish identity is very much like the American identity, whereas there's always American something if you bother to ask the question, right? Or with what intentions you ask that question, obviously. But there's always a Turk Mediterranean person, a Turk Asian person, a Turkish Kurd, Turkish Jew, a Turkish Armenian.
Relationships between men and women are considered sacred, and any display of affection between a couple in a public space, even in front of family, is highly frowned upon. It is also important to note that family is a vital part of Turkish culture. Family is at the heart of everything they do.
lot of other countries do operate like this too, but there's like a lot of intergenerational families. So the idea of like, yeah, working to benefit your family and also living with, whether it be like your nieces, nephews, or going all the way up to your grandma and grandpa, like having 3 generations in a house living together is not uncommon.
It is said that in rural areas in Turkish culture, men are more dependent on women because a woman could do the man's job, but never the other way around. In urban areas, the role of women is similar to those in the United States. Cities are strongly influenced by Western culture with modern factories and shops.
Turkey is a very patriarchal place. It's a very, like man's man place. Like you can actually look at the news the last like 4 or 5 months, like the discussions that the government wants to introduce on women's rights is like very similar to what America had to go through in mid-60s. They're all politics, they're all theater. Nobody really believes many of the arguments that they actually talk about, but it does ring true to a certain group of people in the country. And you can find the same kind of I cannot believe you voted for who you voted for in the state.
Some important things to note when doing business with Turks is that family is sacred. Don't disrespect their family. Additionally, Turks stand physically close to you in a conversation. It's normal to have very little interpersonal space and not something to be concerned about.
Companies such as Nike have long received questions and backlash on their globalization and use of child labor. From a business perspective, it is very important for us to care about the topic of child labor. One may ask, is it truly ethical for an American company to globalize into Turkey, a country that struggles with child labor and authoritarian rule? Based on research and information from our interviews, a company moving into Turkey but staying based in the large cities such as Istanbul would likely not pose the same risk of ethical issues that operating in the more rural areas of Turkey would. While cheap labor is certainly a priority for a large amount of global companies, ethics certainly come into question when these companies allow young Turkish children to work for them for nearly no pay. Despite the efforts of the Turkish government to lower child labor rates, illegal child labor is still extremely prevalent in Turkey. Thus, we recommend that if a company were to expand their reach into Turkey, they should make sure to do everything in their power to ensure that there will be no illegal child labor in their business ventures.
Regarding Turkish food, their cuisine is fresh, healthy, and simple. It stays away from processed items and focuses on whole foods that will contribute to a well-balanced diet. In the interview with Decker, he regarded culture regarding Turkish food, phrasing that Thanksgiving is every week, highlighting the importance of food, family, and culture within Turkey. It is also important to note that because Turkey is bordered by 7 countries, the cuisine is a melting pot of those that it is surrounded by. Dining on the southern border is vastly different from the northeast border. Based on Degger's review of the menu at Istanbul Grill, he says that it's an appropriate representation of city restaurant dining experiences in Istanbul. He also mentioned that when Turkish people migrate to the United States and open restaurants, they take into consideration what will likely translate best as enjoyable to the American palate, as opposed to some of the less flashy traditional dishes.
At the heart of Turkish culture is family. While the country is a melting pot of influences, family remains a key factor no matter where you go. Because the country is such a melting pot, it can be challenging to understand the Turkish culture, even for Turkish citizens. As outsiders looking in, we may not always understand the beliefs, but each day we must strive to obtain a more worldly view. We hope that each of you has been inspired to learn more about Turkey and the many places that have influenced its culture.